Good morning and welcome to chapter 8 already of the story. This morning's chapter is called The Music, and it's also a good one. I'll probably say that every week, but so this is The Music. As long as I can remember, music has been a pretty big part of my life. I mean, a big part. So I remember this coming from someone when I was really little. And we were sitting at church. I mean, I was a little guy, but I remember this. She said, when the notes go up, you go up. And when the notes go down, you go down. And it's my first memory that I have of singing. And of all people, it came from my great Aunt Marilyn, who isn't even really that musical that I know of. I'm sure he's had a pretty singing voice, but that's who told me that. When the notes go up, you go up. When they go down, you go down. And I don't know why, but it just made complete and perfect sense to me well, yeah, oh, duh, of course. So, and right at about the same age, I was probably 4 or 5 years old, I just applied that exact methodology to the piano as well. And if this note meant this key and it went up and then went down, I mean, it just kind of made sense. And really, just for as long as I can remember, music has made sense to me. I remember when I was 6, there was a funeral at our church. I don't even remember whose it was. And my memory isn't even about the funeral per se. I just remember that my grandma, my Nana, who had a beautiful singing voice, and her brother, my Uncle Rick, who also had a beautiful singing voice. So did Grandma B, for that matter, their mom. So it was Nana, Uncle Rick, and these 2 other people from my church. They sang a few songs at this funeral, and it was like a quartet, deal. And I was hooked. I mean, hooked. I can remember that as clearly as anything. I'm pretty sure I was 5 or 6 years old, and I just, oh my gosh, I could not get enough of that. That sound, oh my gosh. So I actually grew up in a church that was very much a part of our lives that did not use instruments. Everything was a cappella. So all the songs that we sang were without instruments. So this idea of a cappella singing was not new to me, but I just remember hearing those 4 singing at that funeral. Like, their harmony was so tight, it sounded so good, and it was just like this drug to me. I could not get over it. And that's kind of how it all began, my little singing piano career that I've had. So there are several people in my life who are definitely responsible for helping and cultivating my love for music. And I mean, the list goes on, but I want to name just a few. The first one is actually my elementary music teacher. Her name was Mrs. McDaniel. And she was kind of a fiery gal, and she obviously loved music, and she loved teaching it. I mean, you could just tell that about her. And we would have music, I think twice a week as elementary kids, and we'd go and we had songbooks, and she'd teach us recorder and, just introduce us to different composers and instruments and all kinds of stuff. And I don't know how we figured this out, but somehow it came to light that I could play piano. And I was in 1st or 2nd grade, and I whipped out the Entertainer, like the full version. And she was like, oh, you can play. And she said, you need to join Keyboard Club. And Keyboard Club was this thing for after school where you could go and bring your own keyboard, or there was a few you could borrow, but they were like the smaller ones. And herself and a few older students would go around the room and teach you, your songs, or help you learn to read music, or whatever you wanted to accomplish while you were there. And you weren't really supposed to be in Keyboard Club until you were in at least 3rd grade. I was in 2nd grade, and she let me join. And so it worked out. I was able to go to Keyboard Club a couple of days after school a week. And I just loved that. I remember when I was 10, my parents actually got me this really big keyboard, like the big one, for Christmas. And oh my goodness, that was probably my favorite gift that I ever received growing up. And I would take it to Keyboard Club. And I just felt like the coolest kid around because I had that keyboard. So the next year, so that was probably when I was like 10 years old. The next year, when I was 11, another amazing thing happened. And that is that this guy that we knew from church had this old piano and he gave it to me. So we didn't have any room for it in our house, but we did in our garage. So this old piano, my dad went and picked it up, and it was like the big, huge, old upright one that weighs like 1,000 pounds. So it was in the garage, and I remember that it was missing a wheel, and so it leaned like the wrong way. Like the whole thing was just crooked. And obviously it was in the garage. So, and where we lived, it got really cold in the winter and whatnot. But I would go out there and just play on it for hours. I mean, I loved my keyboard, and it was amazing in its own way. But a real piano, it was just like, I would sit out there for hours and hours, and I would just play this thing. I'd actually steal my mom's gloves. She had these really pretty white gloves that, like, they were the nice ones. And I would steal them and go out and play my piano until my fingers couldn't move anymore. It's just what I did. Growing up, I did have another piano at my disposal, and that was at my Grandma B's house, and it was this beautiful Baldwin piano. But whenever I played there, I kind of felt like people were listening, and I didn't totally love that. So I didn't play the same way at her house as I did at my house in my garage by myself with this piano, which I'm sure everyone could still hear, but in my mind it was different. And so the first books of sheet music that I ever remember getting, the first one came from my Uncle Gary and at the time Aunt Linda, and they got me this like 150 most popular Disney songs sheet music book, and I learned every goddamn song in that entire book. I mean, to this day, not only because I love Disney, but I know Disney lyrics like crazy because I learned them in that book. And the second book of sheet music that I ever got came from that keyboard that I received when I was 10. And it came with this book of songs that matched all of the pre-recorded songs on the keyboard. So that was really my first introduction, in addition to Mrs. McDaniel, to composers that I really learned to play and love. You know, composers like Mozart, Chopin, Haydn, Tchaikovsky, Liszt, and especially Beethoven. I love Beethoven. That's like melt my heart right there. Just put on one of his piano concertos and I'll shut up. Doesn't matter what kind of mood I'm in. So I had music growing up. It wasn't necessarily like, it wasn't ever forced on me, but it also wasn't necessarily like cultivated per se, but I did have it, with the piano especially. Also, my best friend growing up, Ashley, she had a similar keyboard. It wasn't the same, but it also came with this big book of sheet music that matched the songs on her keyboard. And we would actually have competitions as to who could learn songs the fastest. And so it's really by like listening to those songs and following the notes in the sheet music, because when they go up, you go up, and when they go down, you go down. That is really how I taught myself to read sheet music, and pretty difficult sheet music. I mean, by the time I was in 5th grade, I was playing songs by, Grieg and Tchaikovsky, and I'm sure they were as far from perfect as could be in terms of technique and things like that, but I could play them. I could struggle my way through, and that was my thing. So, in addition to playing piano all the time and making noises, I sang. So there was this time in elementary school, and Mrs. McDaniel was not at class for whatever reason, and we had a sub, and her name was Mrs. Cochran. And she heard me sing during class, and afterwards she pulled me aside, and I was in 2nd grade, and I remember my heart was beating so fast as she walked me across the room. I was like, oh my God, what did I do? I'm in trouble. What's going on? And she started talking to me, and she said, listen, my husband, Mr. Cochran, was a music teacher in town for a lot of years, and he's actually the director of a boy choir. and it's audition only, but I really loved your voice today in class, and you're a little young, but I think that you should audition for boy choir. Well, that was like just hook me right there. So I ran home to tell my mom and dad about this boy choir thing, and Mrs. Cochran said that I should sing in it. And I was met with the objections of it's too expensive, and the rehearsal time was like kind of in the evening. It was at 7 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we lived in the middle of nowhere, so how were we going to make that work? But I was a very determined little kid, and I was in second grade, and I was like, no, we are making this happen. I auditioned for boy choir, got in, and we did can drives, and like in Oregon, you get money for your pop cans. We would go around knocking on doors, and we figured out how to pay for it, and I would stay at my Grandma B's during the week. She would pick me up from school. So like that is how I got into boy choir. So Mr. Cochran, who had been a longtime music teacher in the community, everyone knew him, everyone had him, everyone loved him. He and his wife, Marvin Mary, had, run this boy choir for like at least 30 years by the time I had joined. And it was the coolest thing ever to me. So there was like, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 boys in the choir, and they were divided into sopranos, second sopranos, and altos. And for as long as I could remember, I could sing higher than any girl I'd ever met as a little boy. Little boys have those high voices. So naturally, I was little first soprano right there. And I remember the first time I was ever given a solo, and I was just shaking the first time I ever sang it. It was at the Masonic Lodge in my hometown that we gave a little concert for. But I was just completely hooked. And I sang with the Crook County Cadet Boy Choir from the age of 7 until I was 14 when my voice changed. And I got to tell you, looking back, boy choir and the Cochrans, Marvin Mary, they absolutely saved my life. As you've heard, a lot was going on as a kid. And just this boy choir that I had and the friends that I made in it, it was my escape. It was my thing. And it was just seriously a part of my growing up years. There's not a single memory I can think of that almost doesn't or can't be connected to, doesn't involve boy choir. We had camp every year before the season. We had all kinds of concerts throughout the season. And at the end of every season, we went on some big trip. So the year before I joined, they had actually gone to Japan. I missed out on that one. But we went everywhere. I went to Boston with that group, several major cities in the U.S., Seattle, Portland. And like being a little kid from a super small town, that was a big deal, like a big deal. And I loved boy choir. Sadly, the Cochrans, they needed to retire. So they ended up stopping boy choir several years ago, but they're still around, and I try to go and visit them whenever I'm home because they are just such special people, and they gave so much to the community through that choir. Can't even tell you. So boy choir led me to be in choirs my entire life. I'm still in a choir. I'm still singing. I sing with the Seattle Men's Chorus. I remember in middle school, I was actually selected to go to All-State Honor Choir, and I was in 8th grade, so I was like 13 years old, and or 14, and I actually went, and maybe it was 7th grade, I don't remember, but I was a first soprano. So, here I am, this grown-up little boy, like I'm in middle school, and I can sing higher than any girl there. And I remember being so like embarrassed by that because there's other guys in the choir that are tenors and basses, and I was the only guy in the entire soprano alto section. But at the same time, everyone was like, oh my gosh, how can you sing so well and sing so high? So it's like, it was really strange. And my voice changed right after that. And I went from being a first soprano, and I know I have a very high speaking voice now, but I became a bass 2. I can still sing tenor and a lot of baritone. I can sing baritone just fine, but I'm actually a bass 2. My voice just gets right down there. And it just happened overnight. My voice just changed. So, yeah, always in choirs growing up. It was my thing. Also in band. I'll get to that in a second, but I definitely got hooked on, oh my gosh, what are instruments? An integral part of my life. So when I was 14, in middle school, our piano accompanist for middle school choir, Maureen, she was like the piano teacher in town. And she convinced me, we worked out a deal and somehow we made it work, that I would start taking piano lessons from her. And she was amazing. I had learned a lot about playing piano up to that point in my life, but I didn't know any of sort of the ground rules. I didn't know fingering technique or a lot of just musical technique in general. And so she had to undo a lot of stuff I had self-taught myself, and we worked through it, and I have the best memories with her. But besides piano, she was a clarinetist and a saxophonist, and I would come to her house with all these different instruments that I wanted to learn. And it was just so fun. They were really, truly music lessons, not just piano. So in middle school, I learned to play the saxophone. We had several clarinet lessons. And then in high school, I learned about this thing called a bassoon. And I got really good at it, actually, and did several solo and ensemble pieces, performances on bassoon. And she would help me learn it. She didn't even know how to play it, but we learned together. And she's just the most amazing woman. And she taught me so much about music as well. And these instruments, y'all, I could not get enough of them. I had the best band teachers in school, Mr. Freshner and Miss Hamblin, who is now Mrs. Freshner. That's right, they got married. Love, love, love that. They were the best teachers, and they just whipped us into shape. We were great groups, and they let us be really curious. So I played the trumpet for a while. I played piano in jazz band. I played the mallets, like bells, xylophone, marimba, in the percussion section. I played bassoon. I played trombone. They just let me go for it. And I loved that. They were all school instruments. So I was just borrowing these instruments all the time. And if you'd have asked me in high school what I was going to do with my life as a career, hands down, I was going to be a high school band teacher. That was what I wanted to do. I'm now as far from that as you can get, but that's what I wanted to do. So, music was just a part of my life for as long as I can remember. In high school, I actually joined the jazz choir. That was the elite singing group in high school. And we had this stand-up bass, in a lot of our songs. And I was the first person to raise my hand when they said, now who wants to learn how to play this? I was like, yeah. I just always dragging instruments home and singing and playing. And I know that I annoyed my family like crazy with it, but whatever. Sorry, guys. And also high school was my introduction to musical theater and plays, as well as a lot of opportunities to perform on stage. I would accompany a lot of singers and a lot of instrumentalists for solo and ensemble performances. And I did a lot of piano recitals on stage. Specifically, I remember this cool concert in high school with the ROTC. They did like their gun twirling, rifle spinning thing. Just super fun. But all of the extracurricular music aside, church is really where the music happened. And it's just so funny that I even separate them at all. But in my mind, they were separate. So I grew up in the Church of Christ, and they don't use instruments. It is always a cappella. And our youth minister, he sang all the time. And we all did too. He had this box. We had an overhead projector, and this box just full of hundreds of songs. And we would drag that thing, find the closest plug-in. We would sing them at church, at youth rallies, at camp, at youth group getaways. You name the time, place, wherever, we were singing. And I can't even exaggerate that enough. We sang all the time. I knew hundreds of songs. We even had hymnals in the car. Like, we would just sing constantly. I'd say, you sing the tenor part, you sing alto, I'll take bass or soprano or whatever. And we just would sing. And it was so special. They're some of my favorite memories growing up. And in addition to church music, every year we went to music camp. So we were in Central Oregon, and we would pile in the church bus and drive like 12 hours, because it was so slow, up to way north Washington to this place called Camp Prince's Pine. Weird name, a 4-H camp in the middle of nowhere. And we had music camp there every year. And some of my very best friends to this day were made at that camp. Music camp was the most special time of year for me growing up, and we would just sing all week. And it's at music camp that I actually learned that I also had a knack for directing music. So, fast forward, when I went to a Church of Christ college in the South, music, of course, came with me. And if I had thought that I'd sung a lot before going to college, I didn't know a thing yet, because going to this school, I was met with all these other kids, these students that were coming with similar backgrounds, and we just sang all the time. There was singing at the Downtown Church of Christ on Sunday nights. Oh, just goosebumps. And we would sing in groups all the time. We just bust out into singing. I was in so many singing groups on campus. I was in musicals, just singing all the time. And I took that knack for leading music with me, and I actually used to lead chapel singing. So at my college, chapel every day was mandatory, and there was thousands of people in chapel. And I would get up there and make everyone stand up, which they did not love at 8 or 9 in the morning. And I would lead chapel singing. So I can't even tell you the influence that music has had in my life. Those college groups that I sang with took me to countless states in the South that I would tour in. We traveled internationally, just sang all the time. And I have met so many people around the world because of music and singing. So after college in the South, I joined several local music groups wherever I've lived, and I'm still singing. It's just always going to be a part of my life. I also started teaching piano several years ago, and while I love it, I especially love working with little ones and teaching them piano for the first time. It's a lot, and I find that I don't have a ton of time for it anymore, but I love it as well. The thing is, I love sharing music. I've never actually met anyone personally that says they don't like music, whether it's performing or listening or sort of following it and following all of the artists that make it happen. Music touches our lives a lot. And it's not that we don't talk about it, but we don't typically talk about what music means to us, like as individuals specifically. And for me, music has saved my life in ways I can't even tell you. It's always been there for me. When I was a kid and when things were really rough at school or at home, I would go out to that piano in the garage and I would just play my clunky old upright for hours. And it was my getaway. And when I was without words, either I was overwhelmed or sad or angry or even just so excited and happy, it was straight to that piano and I would compose piece after piece after piece. And there was this magical feeling when you were able to put out a piece of music that sort of sounded the way that you felt. I mean, there's nothing else that we have that allows us to do that. And, singing, especially in groups that were large and small, it was also just that escape. And it would warm my heart and just fill my soul unlike anything I've ever found. There's not a thing out there that does to me what music does to me the same way. It's amazing. It's connected me to countless individuals around the world that I am still in touch with, that I still love. And music was also the basis of so many of my friendships that are still so strong today. There's nothing like your choir friends, your band friends. It's just like this bond. I don't know how to explain it. Oddly, I don't really listen to like modern contemporary music all that much. I don't know who's singing on the radio. I don't know what songs are popular. Like, I don't know why it is. I really don't follow it. You can play 8 seconds of any classical piece to me and I can tell you the era and most likely the composer, but have me listen to something on the radio, I have no idea what you're talking about. But whatever. So, I'm beyond grateful that music was given to me so young, because it was my solace and it was my safe place, and I still count on it as one of the saviors of my life. I know that's dramatic, but it's completely true. I don't know where I'd be without it. And one of my biggest reasons for sharing so much about music with you and in this book is to get this message across. Whatever your thing was as a kid or is today, do it. I believe that these things that we love and we're kind of obsessed with, especially as kids, I believe wholeheartedly that they are given to us so that we can utilize them when we really need them. They are accessible to us when times are rough or hard, and they are truly gifts. Not just gifts that like you're talented and gifted, but it is a gift that you get to access, and it's still there for you. You just have to do it. Make time for it and declare that it's important to you, because they let you get away and they let you just be. And that's what music is for me. I am always going. My brain never shuts off. It's super annoying. But music just calms me down. And somehow I'm able to just be. So, thank you, thank you, thank you to the countless individuals in my life that have helped shape and cultivate my love for music and my ability in music. There are so many people I didn't mention, but they know who they are. And just thank you from the bottom of my heart. And thank you simply to music. Its power has helped me overcome and heal and actually be moved to heights that I don't think I would ever know the way that I do now because of music. So that is my chapter on the music. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you on Thursday when I release a chapter called The Church. That's all. Happy Monday to you, and I will see you later.